Hi everybody, this is Kyle Davison. I've had a lot of questions lately about the Pristophone, about how it got started, about how it was built, about what I've been doing with it. For the past few years, I've been working here in the studio more or less in secret. I've been building and making recordings. In the interest of being more public, I'm going to make a series of videos about different elements of the instrument. The Pristophone is a pitched percussion instrument made of suspended circular saw blades. The range is a little more than 5 octaves, with 66 blades total. To accommodate that many saw blades, the rack has to be very large. The main set here is about 7 feet tall and 11 feet wide. The bass saw rack, which has the 14 lowest pitches, is 7 feet tall and about 15 feet wide. The instrument took about 10 years to build, finishing in 2017. The word Pristophone is derived from ancient Greek. In the same way that xylophone means wood sound, Pristophone means saw sound. The ancient Greek word for saw is prioni or prister. I like the word prister or pristo because it had no preconceived meanings in English. This is sort of an odd time to talk about the Pristophone because it's currently disassembled and in no state to really demonstrate it. It's currently undergoing an overhaul, which means retuning most of the blades, repainting them, replacing all the cords and elastic, regluing the felt, and any other necessary modifications or repairs along the way. But the fact that it's disassembled means I can talk about it in terms of its individual elements. As I go along with the overhaul process, I'm going to use that as an opportunity to talk about the process of initially building the instrument. I'm going to make videos about different topics, including how I source the saws, how I tune them, and how I built the rack. The project started in the summer of 2007. At the time, I had just finished my 3rd semester as a percussion student at UW-Madison, and I spent the summer going to garage sales, to thrift stores, to any place where I could find an object that made an unusual sound when you hit it. I went to the garage sale of a man who worked in a lumber mill in Antigo, and he had in his garage 2 stacks of saw blades. The saws in each stack were identical, and he was asking 50 cents each. So I came home with 2 12-inch saw blades. I did the obvious thing, which is I took it, I stuck it on a cymbal stand, and I hit it. Which sounds kind of cool. It's kind of like a bell sound, a lot of overtones, kind of harsh, not a very focused pitch. Soon after that I discovered you can loop a piece of yarn through the arbor hole and suspend that. And that gives a much different tone. It's a bit more focused, a bit more of a sense of a pitch. And the cool thing about these is with the large arbor hole, you can put a bass bow through it. Months after that, I went to the Antigo General Store, which is a thrift store, liquidator, junk shop. In the back, in a box, I found about 20 old used circular saw blades from a handheld saw. So I picked these up, about 20 of them. The cool thing was I had about 1 of every pitch. So if someone said, hey, I need an E flat, I would say, yes, this is E flat. It's a little out of tune, but technically an E flat. They weren't in a continuous octave, but this got me thinking of the saws as a collection rather than just a few individual different instruments. That same year, I heard from a friend and percussion instructor, Todd Hammis, that he had seen on the side of a building somewhere between Madison and the Mississippi River a gigantic circular saw blade. So one weekend, I, and Jeannie Hammis drove out west from Madison until we got to the Kickapoo trading post, where indeed there was a very large saw, and also inside there were about 20 also large circular saw blades. I had no rope, I had no mallet, I had no tuner, I had no way to know what they even would sound like, but I made the impulsive decision to spend $600 to get all 20 of them, which was a lot of money for me then and is a lot of money for me now, but it was Probably the best decision I've made. And those sounded like this. This is the largest of the set and also the lowest. It weighs about 46 pounds. Nearly all of the bass saw blades come from portable cordwood saws, also called buzz saws, that were used mostly between 1900 and the 1940s to clear land and cut up firewood. The saw was powered by a tractor engine via a belt, and it had a movable table to hold logs. It was just about as dangerous as it looked. This machine was the subject of the poem Out, Out by Robert Frost, in which a boy cuts his wrist and bleeds out. Now that I had a few high saws and a few low saws, I wanted to fill in the gaps in between. To that end, I made a wanted to buy post on Craigslist looking for used circular saw blades. I got a few results here and there, and I biked over Madison to pick up 1 or 2 saws at each place. A little after that, I got a break when someone emailed me to say that he knew someone who sharpened saw blades for a living. This person had a business out of their garage in Oregon, Wisconsin, which is a city about 20 miles south of Madison. So one weekend I biked down there with a piece of rope, with a mallet, and with my tuner. His business is across the road from this massive housing development. It was this sprawling, defoliated hill covered in half-built McMansions with 4-car garages. This was at the height of the 2008 housing bubble. A lot of contractors had set up in the area to build the houses, and they were being served by the saw sharpener. When the carbide teeth of the saws were too worn away to sharpen anymore, he would recycle the saws. I see the instrument as really linked to the time and place in which it was built. I don't think it could have been created in any different geographic region or a different time period because of how closely linked all of the saws are to specific historical movements. With the large tractor blades for the bass saws, they're really tied to the deforestation of the upper Midwest in the early 20th century. And likewise, the blades from contractors are really a product of the trend of suburban sprawl in the beginning of the 21st century. So in a way, all these saws are tools of destruction, and I see my work as transforming them into something creative. That afternoon, I spent about 2 hours searching through all the saw blades. There were about 150 or 200 total. I took each one, I suspended it from a rope, I hid it, and checked it against the tuner. And I came home with about 25 of them. That was enough to give me about two and a half octaves of a continuous chromatic set. I took everything I had at the time and built a wooden rack for them. For several years, this is basically how the instrument remained. I continued to visit antique stores, thrift shops, junk stores, garage sales. Whenever I'd come across saw blades, I'd buy them, and I used them to fill in gaps in the collection, to expand the range, and when I could, to replace saws with others that better fit the tone of the whole instrument. Even just this year in 2020, I've replaced 4 of them. As an example, this is an F that I originally started out with, the high F. It sounds like this. It's a bit thin and it's a difficult target to hit because of the huge arbor hole there. I eventually replaced that with this one. It's a bit heavier, easier to hit certainly. And it resonates a lot better. Another example, you might remember this as the original saw blade I purchased. It sounds about like this. It is a G, technically a G, but there are so many overtones there that it can easily be mistaken for another pitch. I replaced that with this one, which sounds like this. Other ones I've replaced are ones that are just too light and too thin and just don't sound good. This, for example, it's just really tinny. And another one that's similar, this gets sort of a weird pitch bending effect if you hit it hard. Another curiosity, these are the aluminum sharpening discs that are used for sharpening the carbide teeth. They have a diamond edge on them, and they're made of aluminum. If you strike them, they sound like that. Doesn't really work with the set, but it's kind of cool. For the longest time, this was the highest note in my collection. This was an A. I had no idea what this saw was, why there's an indentation in the middle, and I really wanted to expand the range upward. So after an exhaustive internet search, I found out that this is something called a jam saw. It's used for cutting flush to the floor, and the recessed area is for retaining nut to go in there. So when I had that information, I bought 16 more of them, and I was able to expand the range upward by more than an octave. Here I have two of these jam saw blades. These started out identical. This is the lowest pitch of this type of saw that I have. This is an E natural. And this is the highest one, a C sharp. I got this just by hammering it until it's a bit more bell shaped. It still took a long time to find all the pitches, especially on the low end. It wasn't until 2015 that I found the bottom B natural from the main set, and I was able to start building the rack. It wasn't until 2 years later, in 2017, that I found the B natural an octave below that in the bass set, and that gave me a chromatic set across the full range. Thanks for watching. Next time I'm going to talk a bit more about the tuning process.